Welcome to Wisdom in Life. Embrace love with stoic wisdom. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that quiet tension? That uneasy silence when you're alone? No distractions, no noise. Just you and your thoughts. Most men run from that silence. They leap from one relationship to the next, terrified of facing themselves. They cling to anyone just to avoid being alone. But here's the truth. The man who embraces silence transforms, because in that stillness something rare happens. The noise fades, the pressure to impress, to prove yourself, to seek approval. It all disappears. And what remains? Clarity, strength, control. The longer a man walks that path alone, not out of bitterness, but by choice, the more powerful he becomes. His mind sharpens, his standards rise, his focus becomes unshakable. This isn't about rejecting love, it's about rejecting weakness. It's about mastering yourself, so that when you do let someone in, it's not from desperation, it's from a place of power. Today, we're going to explore why solitude isn't something to fear, it's the key to becoming unstoppable. Let's dive in. 1. Breaking free from approval. Seeking most men live their lives chasing approval. They shape their words to avoid judgment. They silence their true thoughts to keep the peace. They bend their standards just to be accepted, and they don't even realize they're doing it. They text back too fast to seem interested. They agree to things they don't believe in just to avoid conflict. They say yes when everything in them is screaming no, all because they're terrified of being disliked, of being ignored, of being forgotten. But a man who has embraced solitude? He breaks that cycle. He doesn't wake up asking, am I good enough? He asks, do I respect myself? And that simple shift, from approval-seeking to self-respect, changes everything, because the moment you stop chasing validation, you start commanding attention without even trying. When you stop asking, do they like me? You start asking, am I proud of who I'm becoming? And here's the paradox. The less you seek approval, the more it naturally comes to you. Women feel it. They sense when a man is grounded, when he's calm, composed, and in control. Not because he's trying to impress her, but because he's focused on something far greater, himself. That presence, it's magnetic. Because while most men are desperate to be chosen, jumping through hoops, softening their words, lowering their standards, the man who values himself, he doesn't shrink. He chooses. He doesn't silence his voice to fit in. He doesn't lower his standards just to gain approval. He stands firm. And that quiet, unshakable confidence is what makes people take notice. Because when you stop chasing, you become the man who gets chosen. When you stop explaining yourself, you become the man who's respected. And when you no longer need to be liked, you become the man who's admired. That's not arrogance. That's not ego. That's real power. A calm, grounded belief in your own worth. The kind of presence that makes people wonder, who is this man? So if you've spent your life chasing approval, trying to be liked, shrinking yourself just to feel accepted, it's time to stop. Stop seeking attention. Stop bending your standards. Stop giving your energy to people who wouldn't notice if you disappeared. Instead, ask yourself one question. Am I living in a way that makes me proud? Because when you focus on that, on becoming a man of integrity, purpose, and strength, the need for approval fades. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing validation is the moment you begin to command it. 2. Raising your standards with confidence. When you stop chasing approval, something powerful happens. Your mind clears. You're no longer trying to be liked, so you stop shrinking, bending, compromising. And in that clarity, your standards rise. Not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. You stop tolerating people who drain your energy, the friends who take more than they give, the relationships that leave you feeling hollow, the ones who only call when they need something. You see it all for what it is. Noise. And you refuse to let that noise distract you anymore. The same goes for women. You stop chasing those who bring nothing meaningful into your life. No more games, no more proving yourself to someone who offers nothing in return. You don't settle for shallow connections because your time is too valuable. You become deliberate, selective, focused. You know what you want, but more importantly, you know what you won't tolerate. And that shift, it changes everything, because when a man has clear standards, when he values himself enough to walk away from anything that doesn't align with who he is, his entire presence transforms. He doesn't argue, he doesn't beg, he doesn't play games. If someone disrespects him, he moves on. If a woman pulls away to test him, he doesn't chase. He responds with calm indifference, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but because he knows who he is. He knows what he brings, and he knows he doesn't need to prove it to anyone. That's what makes him powerful. Most men are afraid to set standards because deep down they're afraid of being alone. They think, if I'm too firm, too direct, no one will stay. But here's the truth. When you raise your standards, when you hold firm to your values, people don't leave you. Only the wrong ones do. The selfish walk away. The disrespectful disappear. The ones who were never meant to stay reveal themselves. And the right ones, they step up. Because a man with standards, a man who carries himself with quiet strength, doesn't need to demand respect. He commands it, simply by being who he is. Women can feel it. They know when a man isn't desperate, when he's not afraid to walk away rather than compromise his values. And that's the kind of man they chase. Because deep down, everyone respects the man who refuses to bend. So if you've been shrinking to fit in, if you've been tolerating people who drain you, chasing relationships that leave you uninspired, stop. Raise your standards. Because the moment you start living like a man who values himself, when you stop accepting less than you deserve, you'll realize something powerful. You don't lose people, you just stop keeping the wrong ones. 3. Mastering emotional strength. Most men crumble under pressure. They react without thinking. They snap when tested. They panic when things fall apart. Why? Because they're ruled by emotion. Anger controls their words. Fear shapes their decisions. Loneliness keeps them in unhealthy relationships. But the man who has mastered solitude, he's different. He's faced his darkest thoughts. He's sat with them, wrestled with them, mastered them. And because of that, he doesn't react like most men do. When someone provokes him, he stays calm. When a woman pulls away, he doesn't beg. When life throws chaos at him, he doesn't panic. Because his strength doesn't come from how others see him. It comes from within. That kind of strength, it's rare. Not because men are weak, but because most never sit in silence long enough to build it. They run from the stillness. They drown their fears in distractions. They bury their insecurities in relationships. They avoid solitude because solitude forces them to confront what's broken inside. But the man who embraces the silence, he grows, stronger than anyone expects. He learns to pause before reacting, to think before speaking, to walk away from disrespect, not out of fear, but out of quiet power. And when you carry that kind of calm, that steady, unshakable presence, something changes. People respect you. Women feel it. Immediately, the quiet strength of a man who doesn't need attention, because he already knows his worth. A man who isn't swayed by her moods, who doesn't fall for her mind games, who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't need anything from her, because he's already whole. Weak men fold under pressure. They crumble when tested. They trade their dignity for a moment of attention. They mistake validation for love. But a man who's mastered his emotions, he becomes untouchable. No insult can break him. No manipulation can control him. No moment of rejection can shake him, because he's not fighting for approval. He's standing firm in self-respect. That's why emotional strength is the greatest power a man can have, because once you master yourself, no one, not her, not the world, can take that power away. So if you're feeling desperate, if you feel out of control, if your emotions have been running your life, step back, step into the silence, because the man who can face himself, the man who can walk through the fire of solitude without flinching, becomes a force no one can move. And once you reach that point, you don't just survive life's storms, you command them. 4. Unlocking laser sharp. Focus. Most men live in a fog, distracted, unfocused. Their minds bounce from craving to craving, scrolling endlessly, chasing validation, wasting time in shallow conversations that lead nowhere, not because they want to, but because they've forgotten what focus feels like. But a man who steps away from the chaos, a man who embraces solitude, he becomes different. When he stops pouring energy into empty relationships, when he stops giving his time to meaningless connections, his mind sharpens like a blade. The mental clutter fades, his thoughts grow clear, his priorities align. Suddenly he's no longer asking, "What should I do?" He knows what matters, his mission, his growth, his purpose. While others scroll, he builds. While others chase, he sharpens. While others waste their days, he stacks wins, day after day, brick by brick, with discipline, with direction. And here's the truth most men never learn. When your focus locks in and when your mind is free from noise, success becomes inevitable. Because in a world drowning in distraction, focus is a superpower. The man who can sit alone, fully committed to his vision, fully dialed in to his craft, becomes unstoppable. That's why the man who embraces solitude rises faster. He's not wasting time chasing people who don't respect him. He's not drained by shallow relationships. Instead, every hour he invests moves him forward, quietly. For the time he once spent chasing approval, he now invests in mastering his skills. Every minute once wasted on mindless conversations, he pours into building his body, sharpening his mind, and forging his future. And when you stack those focused hours, day after day, something changes. You begin to move differently. Your energy shifts. Your presence grows heavier, more intentional, more commanding. People begin to notice. Not because you're asking for attention, but because you've become a man they can't ignore. Women feel it. They sense when a man is driven, when his focus is locked on something bigger than cheap thrills or fleeting pleasure. And suddenly, the same people who once overlooked you, now they're drawn to you, not because you chased them, but because you no longer need them. This is the power of focus, the kind of power that only comes when you cut the noise, ditch the distractions, and start building something real. So if you've been feeling lost, if you've been pouring your energy into things that don't matter, step back. Step into the silence. Because the man who can sit alone, fully committed to his mission, doesn't chase success. Success finds him. 5. Choosing relationships on your terms. Most men don't choose their relationships. They fall into them. They settle out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear they won't find better. And that fear makes them weak. They tolerate disrespect just to avoid being single. They compromise their values just to feel wanted. They silence their voice to keep the peace. But a man who has embraced solitude, he's not chasing connection, he's choosing it, deliberately, on his terms, because he's not looking for someone to complete him, he's already whole. And that's the difference. That's what separates powerful men from the weak majority. The man who's sharpened his mind in silence, built his mission in solitude, and raised his standards in isolation, doesn't tolerate nonsense. He's seen what happens when a man sacrifices his dignity just to hold on to someone who doesn't respect him, and he refuses to live that way. He knows his time is valuable, his energy is sacred, his presence is a privilege, not a gift to be handed out carelessly. So if a woman brings drama instead of peace, he's gone. If she asks him to lower his standards, he walks, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with calm indifference. Because a man who's mastered solitude, he doesn't fear being alone, he thrives in it. And here's a truth most men never realize. The moment you stop needing a relationship is the moment you become the kind of man women can't ignore. Why? Because you're no longer swayed by games. You don't beg, you don't cling, you don't bend to stay liked, you stand firm. And women respect that. Everyone respects that.